I was a graduate of the class in 1992, which would put me in Madison right at the beginning of 1988. I lived on Langdon Street my first year, which I did not know until day one was Fraternity Row, which was an interesting discovery. Quite noisy, but the good news was that they only had parties on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night. You know,
They only ended in Y.
yeah, they gave you one night off. But yeah, so I was there for 4 years. I graduated in 4 years, which was a huge mistake. I should have taken 7 or 8 to get out of Madison, like some of my friends did, because I just loved it. Those are some of the happiest years of my life. I'm still so close with a lot of my roommates, classmates, people that I got to know there. Madison still remains a very, very big part of my life. It holds a big place in my heart.
Well, we enjoy seeing it in your different columns, and I sent some of those out. We had a different selection of work of Jason Gay and emailed out. Lou, you want to ask your question first?
Yeah, Jason, great follower of you.
I appreciate it, Lou.
Read your article. I started watching football here in Madison when I was 8 years old, and
Is that a fact?
yeah, and I graduated in 1947. It's a long time, but I just my question is, where did you get the idea? And I think I know. Refer to the Wolverines as weasels.
So the backstory is that, so I work at the Wall Street Journal, and I had been there for a couple of months before I discovered that I had Wolverines to my right, to my left. My boss was a Wolverine. My boss's boss was a Wolverine. My boss's boss's boss was a Wolverine. I was just knee deep in Wolverine guts, and boy, did they love to tell me about it. And so it sort of began as a good-natured joke at the paper, because there were so many Michigan people and very few Wisconsin people. But then, the circumstances intervened. Wisconsin, of course, has had some really, top-notch athletic teams over the last bunch of years, and Michigan not as much, but certainly remained a formidable rival. And then they had this very, very expensive football coach who they recruited from the universities from San Francisco, Jim Harbaugh, to come to town, to come to Ann Arbor, which I felt like sort of raised the stakes. And it's a funny thing. You all know this much better than I do, but Madison has had its ups and downs in athletics. It certainly had some really great last couple of decades, but it wasn't such a hot thing when I was there. And I just get a huge kick out of it. I get a great deal out of, hearing from Badger fans who like seeing it represented in the newspaper. But I also candidly hear from a lot of Wolverines fans who are taking it the right way, which is what it's intended to be, which is a little bit of good-natured ribbing. I got nothing for love for all my Big Ten fans. I'll ride with the Big Ten over anybody, including in the national championship game, which didn't work out so well this year.
Thank you.
Lou, can you tell me, do you remember what in-state tuition was when you graduated?
Well, I had come back from World War II.
Okay.
I think they were. I had one semester before I got called up. But
okay.
I think it was $48.
Okay. That sounds like a good deal. Now all you have to do, Lou, is just multiply that times 1,000, and you get a semester at Wisconsin in 2021.
Well, another interesting thing, Jason, in those days, the Badgers only played 4 home games.
Okay.
And they all started at 1:30 because there wasn't this ugly
lights
thing we look at all the time. Right? And there was a service club, there were the Elks, the Rotary.
Sure.
And it was called the Gyro Club. And my dad was a member of the Gyro Club.
So was mine.
Is that a fact?
Tickets for kids to go. We could see all 4 games for $1.
Oh, wow.
Per game. We sat in the north end zone. The stadiums were never filled in those days.
Sure.
There was a room, which there always was, at halftime on the 50-yard line, we could all move over to the 50-yard line. So we kids all got to get into the to the 50-yard line. One of the star players at that time was Howie Weiss. You ever hear of him?
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, no question about it that there was a, a really rich tradition. I have to say though, when I was there, people went to go see the band. That was the main attraction. You'd sit in
No,
Camp
no.
Randall for the fifth quarter.
Yeah. Well, I kept my season. I'm a retired physician. I practiced, but my home was in Madison, practiced in Iowa for 24 years.
Okay.
Kept my
Gotcha.
football tickets, my basketball tickets, and I would drive from Waterloo, Iowa,
Wow.
Madison for the football games, because they always were at Saturday at 1:30. And I was also the team physician for the University of Northern Iowa. So we'd leave right after that and drive back to Iowa and get back, because they played their games at night at halftime. And I would watch, or would be on the bench for the Northern Iowa football game at that time.
Wow. So you're a team physician. Is that what you said? You're a team physician?
Yes.
So what did you think Mahomes had a concussion, or do you think he just had like kind of a neck stinger last week?
When I took my residency at Northwestern, and
Okay.
at that time, and I can't remember his name right now, but we had one of the team doctors was starting to work on brain waves and so forth. We
Mhm.
have all the equipment that we have now to deal with that. And he started and wrote some of the first books on
Is that a fact?
concussions. And good
Okay.
Lord, that had to be 1950,
No kidding. Wow.
in the late
Wow.
50s. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Wow. Wow.
Which was
Well, helmets have changed quite a bit.
oh, good Lord, yes.
A lot has. A lot has.
Even in high school in those days, you didn't drink water. They called you a sissy. They wouldn't let you have water. And I had a leather helmet.
Sure. Sure.
And we didn't have a face mask.
Sure.
Pardon?
You want to call?
No.
Oh.
you can-
All right.
No, this is
Hey,
a.
Don, what do you have?
Well, let me tell Jason first. Lou and I are buddies, and with two other people before this year, the other two of sainted memory, would have breakfast every morning, and there'd be 3 copies of the Wall Street Journal there. So we'd turn to see if Jason Gay had a column. We'd read it out loud. And then we'd start laughing hysterically about something. We'd sort of ignore the people around us. But that's sort of the background. And Lou just stole the question I wanted to ask you. Okay. So I've got some more serious things, I guess. Couple.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm grateful for that compliment. That's awfully nice of you.
Yeah. Yes, it was special times. Your very moving eulogy to Tom Perrotta mentioned the pressure of deadlines, journalistic deadlines. How do you deal with these deadlines logistically and intellectually?
Sure. I mean, it's what's interesting about deadlines is how much they've evolved even. So I've been at the Journal for about 10 years. When I got started here, the deadlines were often at night, and they're called, we have multiple editions and they're called stars. So there's the 2-star edition, which is a paper that if you live in a log cabin in the north of, deer country, that's what you get. And then if you're closer to a city, you get maybe a 3 or a 4-star edition. And if you're literally in Wall Street, you get that 5-star edition. And they all have separate deadlines. So like the first star, what we call the Bulldog edition, that would start around 7 o'clock at night. You'd hit that. And there was, 7 was 7. It wasn't 7:01. It wasn't 7:05. So you had to, get everything in there before then. And if the spelling was wrong at 7, it was wrong in the paper the next day, unfortunately. And as things have progressed, the deadlines have moved more towards digital publication. Interestingly, close to 75% of the people who read the Wall Street Journal now read it on a digital device, whether it's a computer at home, an iPad, a telephone, which is shocking to me. I just as somebody who delivered the newspaper, who grew up reading newspapers and feels very strongly in the power of print, I really do still today. It's incredible to see how much of the business has shifted. So what that's interestingly done is move deadlines to the mornings. because people's reading habits are different. They will be reading the paper, or they will be able to, they're looking at the digital product the same way they would read a newspaper in the morning. But you have this benefit of everything that's happened overnight. You can sort of catch up on the news. So I have a column that came out today digitally, published this morning at around 8:30 a.m. It'll be in the newspaper tomorrow, but it's just sort of shifted the schedules. So where my life used to be much more hectic, in the evening hours, the hecticness has moved to the mornings. I can't figure out which one I like or hate more. I just know that it means I have to wake up quite a bit earlier. I have small children. I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, or rather a 6-year-old. She'll be very upset.
Right, we know.
But it means waking up candidly, 4 o'clock in the morning usually, and working so I can get some quiet time in while they're still asleep and not, destroying the furniture. So that's my peak work time in that window. And then it'll change, according to if there's breaking news, an event, something like that. But I'm glad you mentioned the story about my friend Tom, who is a lovely guy and a lovely writer. And one of the things that I felt was a really wonderful skill that he had was he was somebody who could kind of do it all. He was somebody who you could ask to write something very quickly, which we sometimes get asked to do. I like that. I like the person, like those challenges of, someone saying, listen, we need something in 45 minutes, got to be 700 words, and try to keep the nouns in front of the verbs, and let's go. I like that kind of challenge. It reminds me of like sort of old time newspapering. And I figure if, the columnists that I like to read and go back and, read their work, a lot of those fellas were sitting on typewriters, cigarettes, smoking, and they're calling it in on the telephone. And I figure if they could do that, well, I can handle like a computer. So I shouldn't complain.
Well, the thing about these devices is they didn't have the enjoyment of the 4 of us having breakfast with you.
Yeah.
I agree completely. And I feel, like, look, there's a big conversation that's happening in this country right now about like news and news literacy and, what's accurate and what's not. And like, one of the things that I think about with newspapers is that the act of reading a print newspaper, you take it, think about it, you take it, as an article catches your attention, then it does a jump, it jumps to another page, and then it finishes up on that page maybe. And then there's another article on the page, and you're like, you just read a story about tennis, and maybe there's a story about a lost bear or something that's happening in Congress, or maybe there's something happening in a different part of the world. And your eye moves to like stories that aren't curated for you, but they might get your attention somehow. And you sort of widen the understanding of things that are happening in the world. Now everything is kind of curated for you. These digital products, they know what sort of stuff you like because they track you around, and they'll sort of just keep giving you the kinds of information and the kinds of stories that you like to read. The journal tries to not do as much of that because it gets really strange if you start doing that kind of thing. But I don't think there's any question that a print consumer, somebody who is dedicated to reading a print product, probably gets a wider palette of information than someone who's reading strictly digitally. I say this as somebody who reads almost strictly digitally, like 99%. I try to read the weekend newspapers in print, but look, we're all real, and I know that digital is a very easy thing to consume, but it's not without hazard, I think.
Speaking of things going on in the world,
sure,
a lot has happened in the last 12 months. And to what extent do you see these impacting the future of collegiate and professional sports, or do they have a future?
Well, that's an excellent question, and I think you can even drop down to like youth sports. I think that many of you might have family members who have children who are still at it with youth sports, and those leagues have all been affected. If you're playing pee-wee hockey or playing 7th grade basketball, or my brother has got a 16-year-old niece, her boyfriend was the captain of the basketball team. No basketball games this year. No, none. Poor kid was senior in high school. No basketball games here in New York City for him. Those kinds of losses are incredibly significant. And I think that like the pros and the big time college programs get a lot of the attention because they're obviously the big names and the celebrities that we all follow, but there's been just a tremendous amount of impact across athletics. So that first of all, but in terms of directly to your question, I think what it's made us realize is that what a profound impact fans have to the experience, to have actual people in the seats. Now, I was trying to not get to the Packer game. Okay. Like I was trying to avoid conversation about that altogether. It was a tough one, tough. But one thing that was really kind of marvelous to watch was that, handful, a fraction of the crowd at Lambeau, how noisy they could all be and what energy they brought to that day. And when you think about it, I don't know what proportion of the stadium was full. I think it was like 8,000 or 9,000 people, which is probably an eighth of what they could fit in there usually. It's an enormous thing. And so I think that sports franchises and big time college programs are enormously cognizant of what got lost here. And what I hope they do is sort of take the next step, which is to try to create a situation in which you're going to get people more encouraged to be able to attend. When we are all able, and I'm very hopeful, but when we are all able to return to normalcy and be able to be in a large crowd with a bunch of other people, I hope that professional clubs in particular go out of their way to try to create new fans. The number one complaint that I hear from readers, number one, nothing's close, is how they feel disconnected from professional sports now because it's gotten too expensive. That to take a bunch of kids to a Brewer game or to where I live, see a basketball game, you're talking about $300, $400, $500, $700, sometimes more. $50 to park, $20 for popcorn and beer. If the kids want hot dogs, you got to take out a mortgage payment. It's become an extreme expense for a lot of people, and I feel it's led to like sports becoming disconnected from younger people and especially from families. And so I hope that as things revert to normal, that there more attention is paid to cultivating that kind of audience, because I think it's essential.
Thank you.
Thank you, Donald.
Sally, you
I
had
see a
question?
cat. I just saw a cat right there. Who's got a cat on their lap?
That's
You're
Loretta.
muted. That's a fantastic cat. Look at that.
Clearly likes what
Always
you
have-
have to say, Jason.
Always happy to see a cat in the audience.
Yes, I do have a question, and it has to do with, well, professionally, you mentioned cost, but I'm also wondering that I've been reading that some universities and colleges, because the money from the football and basketball, I guess, is low, are now dropping intramural sports and other sports that a lot of non-professionals and regular students participate in the college level like they do on the high school level. So I'm a bit surprised that a university or college would have to look at those lower sports in terms of competitiveness and money
Right.
being dropped because I guess the bigger teams don't bring in the money.
I mean, that's a huge conundrum, and it's not just limited to like even Division I athletics. All these universities and all these athletic departments are looking at budgets and they're making cuts. And you're absolutely right that in most instances, the things that are getting dropped first are non-revenue sports, whether they are intercollegiate sports that don't have television contracts and sources of revenue like that, or it's intramurals or club sports or other things, which I would say are a significant part of the lifeblood of a university. And I think that what I hope happens is a bigger, more existential conversation at a lot of these schools about what is it we doing here? Why are we in this? Are we in this because we want to get a Fox television deal lasting through 2032 we're gonna take a sliver of $1 billion television contract? Or are we a college that is trying to give the most complete collegiate experience to as many students as possible, and therefore we might want to take down the temperature a little bit across all of our sports and not try to just keep chasing the most expensive brass ring. I have my doubts. I think that big time college athletics are enormously addictive. People who are in the business of, trying to generate donations and alumni interest know what value they have. I don't think there's any question that it's been a useful tool for the University of Wisconsin. I think it's pretty hard to put the genie back in the bottle once it's out there and you see how potent it is. But I do think that we are already in an environment now in college athletics where it's really the haves and the have-nots. There's only a fraction of teams that are competing at a high level. The jokes are, every year it's like Alabama and Clemson and Ohio State, and you sort of shake them in a bag, and whoever is on top, it comes out on top. And maybe there's a random team, maybe a Wisconsin gets in there once in a while, but it's really down to a small select group of universities. But to be optimistic, maybe that's a good thing, because what you could possibly have is a situation where these successful supersized programs can kind of break off and create their own structure apart from the NCAA, and they can effectively professionalize. And I don't mean like they're paying quarterbacks $1 million. I mean, they create their own sort of professional structure where they can go out and, outside of the NCAA, solicit contracts and build a business that way. And then the rest of these schools can stop chasing after, like, there's no reason why everybody has to aspire to be the University of Alabama or Clemson or UCLA or anybody, and can go back to the business of being colleges. I think that could actually be sort of a healthy break that could happen. You're seeing a little bit of it. You're seeing some programs, some schools start to opt out of high revenue sports. But I think you're going to see quite a great deal more of it happening, because I think what you're pointing to, and it's a really important thing, that as much as it is a thrill to have those sort of big Saturdays where all the alumni are in town to go to a big game, it's equally important to have as many students participating in these things as possible. And so if it just becomes, the entertainment for a few, you do have to ask the tough questions of what are we in this for?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sally.
Other questions for Jason? Carol, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to know how much sports reporting he did when he was on campus. And also, if you got to know the local papers and their sports reporters. And I offer this question as a veteran of the Daily Cardinal, not sports, but at any rate, I keep track of that, and I came a little bit after Lou left.
Okay.
So it's a long time, okay?
My answer is only embarrassing, which is that I didn't take much advantage of it at all. When I got there, there was this wonderful ecosystem. You had two daily papers on campus, two daily print papers. You had the Daily Cardinal, your alma mater, and you had the Badger Herald. I wrote a little bit for both of them, nothing memorable. And I never was, sort of a newsroom creature at all. There were also excellent newspapers. There was the original WSJ, the Wisconsin State Journal. And there was also the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, both of whom I had friends who went on to write for out of Madison, out of being the Daily Cardinal. But I feel like, somebody who lived in California and never learned to surf. Like, I was surrounded by all this amazing, like, journalistic infrastructure and all these great teachers and programs, but I didn't take advantage of it. If you want to ask me about what it's like to drink beer at Memorial Union out on the terrace, I can give you a really very good answer about that.
Okay,
As I did an awful lot of that.
thank you.
I'm okay.
Thank you, Carol.
Jason, where did you work before the Wall Street Journal?
Well, I I worked at Pizzeria Uno on State Street for a while. My first job was a custodian there. And then it was a little messy. You do not want to clean up a Pizzeria Uno after a big night in Madison on a Friday morning. But I went to, when I got out of school, I got a job working at a small newspaper in Massachusetts where I sold advertising. It was a job that a friend of mine had quit. And I thought, well, selling ads at a newspaper sounds like a legit job that someone should have when they graduate from college. So that's what I did for close to a year and a half. And I was so lousy. I mean, this is a true story. I was so terrible at it that the editor of the paper said, well, this guy can't sell an ad. Maybe we can write. Let's try him out. And I started writing Little League baseball games, like quite literally, like going up to like 7-year-old kids and asking them, about home runs and double plays and that kind of stuff, and high school sports. and then graduated from that to a bigger newspaper in Boston called the Boston Phoenix. And then from there got to New York close to about 20 years ago. And I worked at a paper called the New York Observer, which was sort of a very sort of small circulation, kind of zany, you know, the TV show Sex and the City, that came out of that. And it was just kind of a very offbeat, quirky kind of place. I loved working there. And then I got into magazines, and I was in magazines for about 10 years. I worked at GQ magazine. You can't tell that I have any GQ in me, but it's true. I did work there. And then it went to the Journal. And I had no financial acumen whatsoever. I was barely a Journal reader, but I felt it was a paper that my father-in-law was impressed by, so I was all in. That sounded good to me. You know, he finally talked to me at Thanksgiving. The son-in-law worked at the Wall Street Journal, so that was good enough for me.
Jason, how are you getting along with the kids during this lockdown?
I appreciate that, Jack. Jack, I need you over here in about an hour and a half because they'll both be home and it's going to be a madhouse over here. So if you can get over here and babysit for a couple hours, that would be great. Oh gosh, you know what it's like. I'm sure you have friends and family who are talking about what a complicated situation this has been. I'm in a sort of a double whammy because my wife is a school teacher. So the kids have been sometimes in school and sometimes have been home. So in the times that they've been home, we're talking about a situation where and this is a small apartment. Don't get the wrong idea. I got one kid in one room. I got another kid in another room. And then my wife is down the hall in the last room teaching her class. So there are 3 separate classes going on in 3 separate rooms. They're all calling for water, for snacks. Their internet isn't working, all that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of the IT guy in between trying to do my job. So, but listen, you know, this thing has been so fraught and challenging for everybody. And I think mostly of the health and welfare of the people that I love and my mom and like all that kind of stuff, because that's the most important thing. These inconveniences, we're already looking back on and laughing at them a little bit. It's frustrating at times, but you know, we have it pretty good here. And I think mostly of people who have had true challenges here and there are a lot of folks like that. So we feel very lucky.
Speaking of Thanksgiving, Jason, I'm sorry. A couple of years ago at our Thanksgiving, we had a family discussion of this.
Oh boy. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I brought one of my family members out of sort of a dump. But I wonder if you have another book in the works or in your mind.
Yes, I can say that definitively. Yes, I have another book. It is very, very close to like being, you know, getting an arrangement to be published. It's about these days, like what we've been through, all of us in the last year. It's meant to be upbeat, inspirational, positive. You know, it's a funny thing because, you know, I think that like all of us, these 12 months or so have presented enormous challenges and complications and sometimes really chaotic things for people. But I think have also sort of underlined things that are important, right? And foremost are that sort of communication and family and keeping people close to you. And that has been an enormously eye-opening period. You know, I think that like, I've said this to my bosses, but like, I think this has been like the most complicated period of time to be a sports writer. But there were no sports for 5 months, for gosh sakes. There was nothing to write about. They didn't have any games. And yet I've never sort of felt more, you know, like in readers' lives and had something to say more, because I think there was so much common ground. It's a crazy thing to say right now, right? When we're dealing with so much combativeness in the world and the media and so on. But I do think that like there are real like pieces of common ground here. And that's what I intend to write about. So thank you for that. I'll sign you up for 20 copies, Donald.
Good. I'll be your agent.
All right.
Jason, how do you get assignments? Who do you work through? Paul,
Sure. Well, so we're in constant communication. We have a daily call every day where we talk about like things that are happening in the world and who's covering what. There are about 12 of us in the sports department of the Wall Street Journal. And, you know, people are divided up among sports, you know, like, so we have a basketball guy, a baseball guy, a couple women who are enormously talented writing about the Olympics and college sports. Even though they went to Michigan, they're pretty smart. So we divided up that way. And then, you know, in terms of what I read about specifically, it's usually we're looking at 2 or 3 ideas, and then, you know, the bosses pick one. So like, for example, you know, yesterday we're sitting there like, you know, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we don't know if we got a Packer win, a Bills win, a Chiefs win, if Tom Brady's going home or Tom Brady's going to play. You know, it's not until obviously the dust settles that we have a clear idea what we're doing. But I, you know, usually write, you know, stories that are based off the news, but then also some sort of more self-starting things that are about stories. I have a story that I'm writing right now that you might find interesting about. There are about 8 gentlemen in the United States who have been to every single one of the Super Bowls. They range in age from about 79 to 87. And they're called the Never Miss a Super Bowl Club. And then there's another one called the Super Bowl 5. And a couple of weeks ago, I was like, well, what are these guys going to do? Like, you know, can't exactly get on a plane necessarily, or, you know, it's maybe you're not vaccinated or what the story is, but it turns out they're all going. They're not going to miss it. They're going to be at the game. So I've been talking to them for a couple of weeks and, you know, getting to know them a little bit. So that's a story that I have coming out hopefully in a few days. And, you know, it's just a conversation really with editors about what I'm interested in, what they're interested in. We try to meet somewhere in between. And readers, I should say. You know, I get great ideas from readers all the time. You know, I mean, the feedback that I get is wonderful. It's something I don't take for granted at all, because I've certainly worked at places where I got no feedback. So I really appreciate it.
MJ, go ahead.
Well, here's a feedback for you. A little attention to some of the really outstanding women's college teams. And I know there's somebody on this conversation with us who will appreciate that I'm saying this. But right now, UW has #1 in women's volleyball and #1 in women's hockey. And do you think there's going to be any kind of a story anywhere nationally about that? Probably not.
It's a good question, and it's a very legitimate point. And I think there is a disproportionate amount of attention paid to men's sports, even the non-interesting men's sports, unquestionably. And it's, you know, it's a mirror of what happens in television. You know, where the coverage is way over based upon men's sports.
And this is particularly tender because I was there. I'm no good at sports. I'm a great fan. But I was on campus in the 60s, right after the football team tanked, before the 5th quarter ever was conceived, and saw my first men's hockey game at Hartmeyer Ice Arena.
Okay. That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
No, look, I'm taking this as a constructive note, and I'm going to make a note of it and talk to our college sports correspondents about this kind of thing, because I think that we have, you know, we too often over-focus on men's sports. And I also think that we've candidly spent a great deal of time focusing on the coronavirus and what that impact has been on sports, and not paid that as much attention to what's actually happening on the court, right? You know,
right. Well, and the fact that we can't fill the Kohl Center for a really good men's hockey game.
Sure. The volleyball plays in the field house, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's, you know, it's terrible, you know, and
but on the other hand, North Dakota killed their women's hockey team.
Yeah.
And we've gotten 2 super good goalies out of that.
Is that a fact? No kidding.
That's a fact.
Just immediate transfers, they let them right over?
The first one came as an immediate transfer. The other one went someplace else first and is here this year.
Gotcha. And this is Mark still coaching the team?
Oh yeah. Over 500 wins.
Amazing.
Yeah. I mean, he is just amazing. And
one of my first sports heroes.
I mean, just self-effacing. Was really embarrassed when they retired his number and hung it in the Kohl Center.
Yeah. Well, he deserved it.
Absolutely. But he was as red as your shirt.
This is my old Bucky Badger Adidas shirt. And this is a true story. A couple years ago, I went to Madison and I was in town for a game, and I was going to be somewhere where Mr. Alvarez was. And somebody in Wisconsin pulled me aside and said, "You can't wear that Adidas crap anymore. You got to put on some Under Armour, buddy. Adidas, we don't have." And it made me change. True story.
Did they give you a free Under Armour shirt because of it?
You know, here's the sad truth is that, so when you work at a financial newspaper like the Wall Street Journal, there's no such thing as a free nothing. You got to keep it really clean and tight with any kind of conflict of interest. So even from my alma mater, I could not accept a free shirt. I cannot accept any gift that over about $15 worth of value, which really
Interesting.
rules out a nice
Well,
bottle of
That's interesting.
There's Babcock ice cream.
Babcock ice cream. I think it will get me under 15. Yeah. Can I ask you guys a quick favor, which is that I have to get my daughter onto a singing lesson, which is going to take me about 2 seconds, and I'll come right back. Is that okay?
Sure.
Sure,
Don't
thank
mind?
you.
I'm gonna log her onto her singing class and then close the door, unless you want to hear a 6-year-old doing singing scales. But hold on just a quick second, okay? Thank you.
Huh.
Jojo?
Any final questions people want to ask when he comes back? Just
Yeah,
pretty
Mike.
nice.
Tim, I have one about the obscene salaries that coaches are paid compared to presidents of the university and professors and so on. I don't know whether that's a legitimate question or not.
Yeah, you get his input on it, sure.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I would like to know how they pick the reporter that goes to the various championship games. Are they allotted so many tickets to the sports department? Are they picked? Can the reporter pick the games he wants to go to? I'd like to know that.
Okay. So maybe we'll go Sally and then oh, there's his daughter. Sally and then Lou.
Yes. Did you see her? Did you all see the little girl?
Yeah, oh, she's back.
So Jack, that's the answer to how you handle being home with your kids.
Yeah, he always has some kind of comment about it in the articles. I never miss the articles every day. I'd like to kind of get his reflection on Henry Aaron.
Yeah, well, we should. I think if we could fit that one in too, and maybe 3 more questions, and he can get back. Carol, go ahead.
I just have been so disappointed in all of the stories about Hank Aaron that nobody mentions. He started his career with a farm team in Eau Claire.
Right.
Interesting.
Right.
Wasn't there very long, but I would hope maybe Jason knew that, maybe not.
I thought that was in the State Journal.
That may be the one place that I saw it. I know I was looking.
But it
at
wasn't on
Barrett.
any of the MLB stories.
Yeah.
Hi there. Well,
Thanks, Jason. We'll just do a few more questions and let you
that's
go.
all right. No, I can't remember who asked the question of what it's like these days. Well, that's what it's like, you know. So you're doing an interview 1 minute, and then you're running out to make sure that someone's on a singing lesson, and it's about the cutest thing you've ever heard. We're right now we're deep into the musical Annie, so there's a lot of Tomorrow and A Hard Knock Life. A lot of singing of those songs.
2 classics.
Yeah, some real classics.
Sally has a question about inflated coaches' salaries, and I'm sure
yeah.
Jim Harbaugh won't be involved in the answer.
Well, compared to the academic salaries is what I'm looking at in terms of the university.
Oh, I mean, listen, I would just support English professors getting $7 million a year. How about that? How do we like that? You know, $7 million a year English teachers, I think, is the rule of the day. It's a very interesting conversation for multiple reasons, primarily because, to me, that these stratospheric salaries in college sports are a reflection of what the economy of college sports has now become. And you're talking about, multi-billion-dollar television deals for men's college basketball, men's football. Sometimes conferences themselves being able to secure $500 million deals just for the conference. And so the money gets, funneled into coaching salaries. It gets fun. You want water? Hold on a second.
He definitely speaks from experience. He's not making anything up.
Here we go.
Here.
Anyway, so the places where that money is allotted to, it goes into coaching salaries. It goes into some of these crazy facilities. Wisconsin has some real top shelf facilities now, but they're not even at the top of the crazy barrel. Clemson has a water slide. There's a school down in Florida, the University of Central Florida, which is talking about building a lazy river at its football facility where they could get into little pontoon boats and ride around at practice time. And really what this is a way of channeling money to make programs competitive without paying players, which is an enormous hurdle to cross, right? Because, everyone sort of is terrified of the idea of, well, when you start paying athletes, what is that landscape going to look like? Does college football resemble college football anymore? The argument for it is that, well, you effectively professionalize everything else. And what you see in college football now, the reason why Jim Harbaugh is able to be paid $8 million a year or $9 million a year, whatever he's getting paid, is because there's just so much cash on hand that they have to put it somewhere. A couple of years ago, I had a chance to go to a conference of sports economists at the University of Florida itself, a college sports hotbed. And these were folks who had such interesting ideas about just like what that landscape looks like and how just strange it is. And what's interesting is a lot of these ideas are now in courts. There's a case, Alston versus the NCAA, which is currently before the Supreme Court, which is about universities and paying athletes and allowing athletes to capitalize on what's called their name, image, and likeness, which is the kind of thing where, like, say, you were a college football athlete and kids on the street were buying your shirt for $45 from Nike. Are you entitled to a cut of that money? And that's the kind of thing that 20 years ago, folks would have said, forget about it. You're in college, you're getting a nice scholarship. What's the big problem? Nowadays, that's a little harder argument to make. I would say, we were talking about, I was talking about reader comments and things. I would say one of the most interesting reader shifts in the time that I've been doing this is that I've seen among readers a migration from, we shouldn't be paying these college athletes, absolutely not, this is ridiculous, to, is there some sort of equitable solution to this that allows them to share in this crazy economy that they're part of without detonating the whole thing? And I think we are going there. I don't think you will find a college coach or an AD who doesn't think that something has to give here. So that's a big thing that's afoot here.
Thank you.
Lou, how about your question on picking assignments?
Yeah, I was wondering, you get to pick the championship games that are played, or do they send you tickets to go to that, or how does that? How does the reporter get picked to go to?
Sure. Okay. Well, that's a really good question. So what they do is, it's just like a credentialing process. So what you typically do is they let you, apply as if you're like applying for a visa or something like that. You give them your name and information and your social security number, because like for something like a championship game, there's sometimes security. So they want to find out if you have a rap sheet. And then they, evaluate the credential applications that are coming from, multiple media outlets, and they make their choices from there. I'm very, very, very fortunate to work at a place like the Wall Street Journal, which has a very large reader base, 3.5 million people. Almost everybody wants the Journal to be at one of its sporting events. So we usually get credentialed to things that we want to go to. And then when you get there, it's, security and checking your name off and you're assigned a desk. And I can tell you what, what it's like now, because I've been able to go to some of these sporting events amid coronavirus, and it's very strange because there's no human interaction at all. You go through the security and you do all that kind of stuff. But I went to an NBA game recently. I was tested in the lobby of the arena.
Really?
And they gave me the results 20 minutes later. Okay. And I mean, between us, but like my wife and I are sitting here talking about like, testing, and sometimes you have to pay for it. And so I was like, well, honey, I'll just go to an NBA game. They'll give you a free test. I'll just have to sit through a basketball game. So, and it's a much more sterile environment, and all the interviews that you do with athletes are now done this way. I can't wait to get back to all of it, to all the craziness, because that's the stuff that I really love. I'm over it. I've seen enough Zoom tennis and Zoom, basketball and baseball and all that.
Thank you.
Carol,
Thank
would you
you.
like to kind of wrap things up with your thoughts on Hank Aaron?
Oh yeah.
I raised the question of why Eau Claire was not getting the attention they deserved, because that was his first farm team. Before he went to the Braves, he was in Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
And that was after the Clowns? That was his first professional team with the Braves, was the Eau Claire. Is that correct?
It
Yeah.
was, yes.
I'm vaguely aware of that. I was not covering that story. I did not write our obituary for it, so I don't know all that backstory, but that's an interesting point. I mean, I think that one of the things that happens when you lose a legend like that is that, so many people have their own sort of personal connections to it, that sometimes it takes a little time for all of them to sort of filter out to the public. I think we'll probably get there. I think you'll probably see some people write about those kinds of parts of their lives. I think obviously when Aaron died, immediately the thoughts went to like the more seismic, things like, 755 and, what that chase was like and what kind of man he was. But I think the backstory is very interesting. And what an American life, really. What an amazing thing. I mean, one thing that is interesting about when we lose an icon like that. So a lot of obituaries are pre-written. I don't know if folks know this, but you'll have like, somebody on staff gets assigned, like, oh, Hank Aaron's 86. He's, maybe been a little ill. We should be developing an obituary, and so, all the presidents are like that. This was one for Muhammad Ali, like they will have those obits on hand, sometimes with telephone numbers of people to call when the person dies, just to get comment on it, treat it almost like a, a national treasure or a head of state. So that was the case with Hank Aaron. So that sometimes when you see like, you have breaking news that you have someone passed away, and then there's this gigantic obituary. You're like, how the heck did this person write this 3,000 word story just now? The fact is they didn't, they were writing it for months, sometimes years. There's been a very quirky thing that happens every once in a while where someone might pass away and the person who wrote the obit has also passed away. In the interim. So just a quirky, and this has been the case in newspapers for a very long time. There's an obituary desk at some of the great newspapers, and that's what they do. And so that was definitely the case with Aaron. But Eau Claire, that's a good note to have. That, hockey, volleyball, I'm on it.
Well, Jason, we really appreciate you taking time to talk to all of us today. You've definitely brightened our days, and we appreciate the back and forth and you sharing your unique experiences.
Well, I'm honored. I'm really grateful to have this opportunity. I never brighten anyone's day around here, so just to be able to brighten anyone's day is a real thrill. And please stay in touch. I'd love to connect some more. And please write to me and tell me when you think I'm messing up or doing well or somewhere in between. I'm always grateful to hear from anybody who reads the paper. I don't take it lightly at all. And I wish you and all your families the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next time you're in Madison, we'll look for you. Thank you.
I can't wait. I can't wait to get back there. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone. Have a great afternoon. Stay well.
Oh, boy.